If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
The days are getting shorter, and for some reason, I was reminded of the times that I went hunting with my grandfather. And I know this kind of is the way my mind works, and it may not completely correlate to what people think I'm going to be talking about here, but we used to get up early to go hunting. And with the time change here, we would have to get out there super, super early because it was getting lighter a little bit earlier. So he'd be waking me up at like 4:00 in the morning, kicking me in my sleeping bag. And I remember the first time that I went hunting and I had a shotgun. A lot of, people now, they're just like, we go hunting with rifles and different types of stuff. And I kept on thinking about the fact that I could only have buckshot in my shotgun and did not get the pumpkin ball. And I wanted to ask you, Scott, are you a hunter? And do you know the difference between buckshot and a pumpkin ball?
Well, I used to be a hunter when, because, I live in the sticks and hunter safety courses were part of the school curriculum. And hunter safety camp was something that we did in sixth grade where we would go and sleep over. In fact, my son just did that this year. He's in sixth grade. And then so my dad and I did go hunting for a few years and never had much luck. Never hunted with a shotgun. So I probably couldn't tell you the difference between buckshot and a pumpkin ball. Yeah, I do. When you were talking about that, it brought back a lot of fond memories of getting up early with my dad, going with my uncles and having a big hunting party, and then coming back and my mom had made vegetable beef stew and eating that. And that brings back some good memories.
Yeah, and here's the thing is I haven't hunted in probably a good 15 to 20 years. But basically, with buckshot is, it's in the cartridge. When you shoot it, it shoots out between 9 to 27 pellets. Usually when you're going hunting for buck, you would use the 9 ones because they were a little bit bigger. But you were hoping that, one of those would hit something that, I'm hopefully there's not anybody out there that, hates but would just hit something that would take the deer down and, peacefully. The pumpkin ball was that slug inside the shotgun. And that was basically like where you had to have like the good aim and you had to, hit it precisely. And, my grandfather knew that, as a 12-year-old boy, my aim was not going to be, good enough to get something with that pumpkin ball. So he said, if we give this kid some buckshot, he might be able to hit something. And the reason I bring this all up, other than to have us, reminisce about these great memories with our family, is just that I feel like this offseason for the Pirates, and especially the conversations I've been hearing, has been a lot of buckshot. It has been a lot of just a spray and kind of hope that something hits, as opposed to, getting that pumpkin ball to go right through the bullseye, to hit right where you want to hit it and get what you're expecting. Because, not to get graphic, but basically, you hit a deer in the heart with that buckshot, it's going, you hit it with the pumpkin ball, it's going down. And I think that's what a lot of Pirates fans and a lot of the podcasters and different stuff I've been hearing out there is that, I think they believe they're shooting with a pumpkin ball, but they're actually shooting with buckshot. Names are being brought up of players that the Pirates should sign to improve the team. And I'm not advocating for them not to do that. I think I'm just more of like that cautious fan or that cautious podcaster who is wanting to show you guys, both sides of the tape.
Mm-hmm.
Basically hearing that if we go out and sign this guy who did, A, B, and C last year and sign him for this many $1 million, it kind of sounds like that's going to be a direct hit. That it's going to be something that's automatically, going to improve the team, no questions asked, and that there are no hangups with this. There are no, opt outs. There are no injuries. There are no previous bad seasons by this player. And yes, the Pirates are, not at, the top of the ranks of people who are going to go after the players who I believe would be those, or should be those guys that are, no questions asked. Juan Soto. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows the name.
Yeah.
I believe Juan Soto is no questions asked. No matter what you pay him, barring injury, is probably going to live up to that contract, or at least live up to the expectations that fans have of that contract, or live up to something that you could deal with if he performs that way to that contract. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. Remember that big contract that he turned down in Washington, and everybody thought, "Well, you're crazy for turning that kind of money down." And he bet on himself, and he's really going to cash in. But I think that to your point with the buckshot for the offseason is that um, there's not. We don't really know what they're looking for at this point. I mean, we don't know if they're looking for a first baseman or internally if they're going to move Brian Reynolds and they're looking for an outfielder. So we're just kind of, you know, just kind of twiddling our thumbs when it comes to that because we're not entirely sure what is on their shopping list. But also at the same time, a lot of our prospects that we had high hopes for have come up, and we're hoping for internal improvement with that. And so, like we were talking before the show, that maybe your biggest upgrades come on the bench and the bullpen. And so maybe some of these big glaring spots that we've talked about in the past in previous years of needing aren't the glaring needs that they once were. Like we were saying too, is shortstop settled? Is IKF going to be your shortstop for this year, or Figueroa in that position? So maybe that's not as much of a need. Second base, which has always been over the last handful of years, a position that we've been looking at in the offseason. That seems to be pretty settled with Nick Gonzalez, at least at the time being. The we have De La Cruz in the outfield. We have center field seems to be settled with O'Neill Cruz with our high hopes there. So I think that when you listen to a lot of Pirates media, fan media, they're all over the place because we're getting closer. It seems like that the glaring needs aren't there, and we just don't have a clear direction that this team is going for their shopping in the offseason.
Yeah, and that's where like the frustration comes in. At least I feel like for a lot of fans is we're trying to fill holes where we don't know where those holes exist. I mean, we think we know where those holes exist. Like you said, we've had conversations a lot about, we may know what the Pirates are going to do if they pick up a first baseman, say a Carlos Santana or whoever at Paul Goldschmidt. I mean, enter name here, do a Mad Lib of, what player is going to be in there. Then you're probably thinking that, Brian Reynolds may not be in that position or maybe at least eased into that position over this season because we have Brian Reynolds, in control for more than just this year. So if you're looking beyond that, if they pick up somebody who is, a left fielder or who has been a left fielder for most of his career, say a Michael Conforto is a name I've seen thrown out there a decent amount.
Yeah.
Then I would think that either Brian Reynolds is moving to right field something that they had, talked about a decent amount last year, or he's going to first base. Even that's not settled yet. So, I mean, it's going to take a little while for this situation to be sorted out. And the one thing you mentioned there, and it is something we talked about before the show, is IKF, because yes, I believe that IKF on a contender should be more of a utility man. It's a role that he feels better, and he does play so many positions around the average. Like, we know shortstop's his worst position. Second base is probably his best position. He can play some outfield. I mean, he pretty much plays everywhere except for catcher, and could probably do that, in a pinch.
Well,
So
let me ask you
that,
this then. If I can ask you this, maybe do you put Triolo as your starting shortstop, and then you let IKF be your utility guy? Because the opposite is going to be one way or the other. I think is going to be the way they go. Either you have Triolo and you work IKF in around the diamond and basically playing every day and just giving rest to your guys around the diamond, or you have him playing shortstop every day, and then because Triolo can play first base, we saw that a couple years ago. You know, that just opens up different options.
yeah, and I mean, I would be fine with either one of those. I think that what it kind of comes down to in that discussion, Scott, is that basically, people are looking to upgrade at the shortstop position. And number one, I don't think the Pirates are looking to do that. I mean, just from what Ben Charrington has said, the way that they played him, to say that, we're making these moves and for 2024 and beyond. I mean, obviously Brian De La Cruz has a longer contract, but to me, the way that they stuck with IKF at shortstop after that, I mean, obviously the Key Brian Hayes injury,
Mhm.
kind of feeds into that as well. But I mean, either way, I think that, like, the upgraded shortstop may not be, where the biggest improvement needs to be made. We'll also see what they do with Brian De La Cruz once, the arbitration decisions are made. So that's going to feed into a lot of this discussion as well. But I mean, with IKF, I mean, looking back, he's never been like a high OPS guy. In Toronto last year, before we acquired him, he hit out of his mind. He had a 758 OPS. The highest he had for his career before that was 699 with Texas in 2020 for a 93, OPS plus. So he's not really there for his bat. I think that a lot of Pirates fans had that stuff envisioned with him because he had been hitting so well. But it doesn't mean he's not a good player, because, outside of his 2023 season with the Yankees, and I look at B WAR on this, where he was 0.0 B WAR. For the previous years, he was 2.9, 3.6, 2.0. This year, he was 3.6. So he was pretty much in line for what he had been throughout his career. It was just kind of unfortunate that we got him for the bad part of the season, as opposed to, his playing out of his mind part of the season.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a guy who is he's had a Gold Glove in the past. I really look at him and I think of the high baseball IQ he has, and that's not always something that translates into the numbers. But when you watch him, you really see he's making smart plays, and he could really benefit the the infield by making smart plays and maybe working with some of the guys. If you have a longer time of him and Nikki G working together as a double play combo, maybe that unlocks a little bit more defense in Nikki. Yeah, I think that you're right. He's been a pretty steady constant. Um, and I think that because of that, he's an important part of this team. But he's not that much different than something else we were talking about before the show of these 1 year contracts. Where is that going to lead throughout this year? It doesn't really solve it long term, and I think that that's something that Pirates fans in general at a few different positions have really been clamoring for is, can we get some consistency? Can we get some a clearer path for the future? Is Piguero going to be the shortstop long term? Is IKF just here for this next year because that's what was on his contract? Because if they were to go outside the organization and sign, say, a Kevin Newman who just got picked up, by the Angels, those kind of contracts traditionally with Charrington since he came here, those have all been 1 year contracts, and so it's kind of like they went out and got somebody for this year, but it doesn't really help us long term.
No, and that's like that definitely is a frustration. I think that with IKF and with Piguero, and there's another name I would throw in there is Sung Chae Chang, is
Yeah.
hoping some of those guys would take a bigger step forward last year. With Piguero, I mean, in Altoona the year before, he was hot for a little while, was cold for a long while. The defense definitely improved. This year, struggled not all season for Indianapolis, but only had a little bit of a burst, but once again saw the defense improve. So I think that that's where like the backfill hasn't worked out the way that the Pirates thought it would, because if IKF is, 1 year guy and you would be looking to move him at this trade deadline for something, or just letting him play out the rest of his contract, maybe as that utility guy towards the end of the season, you would be looking for one of those players, either a Piguero or a Chang, to push him out of that position at this point in time, or for Piguero to have done it more last year,
Hmm.
where at that point in time you wouldn't have even really needed to acquire, IKF, because he would have been pushing his way up, and their move that they wanted to make and put O'Neill in the outfield could have happened, I guess, more symbiotically, more naturally,
Hmm.
as opposed to having somebody come out and fill that position. And that's like part of the thing that I was thinking out about with you and talking through before was just like, if IKF's going to be that guy, do we need to backfill that better? I mean, we mentioned Piguero, who's, not really had a lot of success with the majors. Uh, Alika Williams, who, I mean, unfortunately, the bat has never come around. He was a guy who I had back in my writing days written about, the Pirates possibly taking in the second round of that draft, just because he had, some of that contact potential. The guy that, he may not be the big power hitter, but was going to hit well, was going to get on base, was probably going to steal bases, play good defense. And right now in the majors has only shown good defense. I know that people want to fill the major positions, and like we talked about, we don't know what those positions are, and we'll talk about those, a little bit here, kind of those, what people are looking for, what we're looking for, what positions we think might get filled. But I had talked about maybe kind of getting better backups. It may cost a little bit more money, but the drop off wouldn't be as significant if a player was injured. Like, you look at Jared Triolo this year, and you had Brian Hayes' injury. In the time that he filled in for Brian Hayes, he was pretty much the median level of what you would expect from Brian Hayes. I mean, I know Brian Hayes has had his outbursts at times previously, but kind of across his career, if Jared Triolo is playing third base, for this entire season, we're talking about what would be a major league starter, a 2 to a 4 WAR player, depending on how good the defense was. If the bat continued, what it would look like for the rest of the year playing consistently. if you have, say, an IKF injury and you keep him and you're putting Alika Williams in, yeah, you're going to get really good defense over there. Piguero, it's kind of like a crapshoot as to what you're going to get over there. May it be a smart move to not only fill those holes, but maybe find a cheap guy? Obviously, Kevin Newman isn't available anymore. A lot of people wouldn't realize that Kevin Newman had over 2 WAR last season, which would be a regular starter on a Major League Baseball team, according to those statistics, and backfill it with that with someone who would be cheap and would be kind of an insurance policy in case some of the guys don't develop.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that with the kind of contracts that Charrington has been giving out, then that doesn't leave much of a problem. With the next thing I'm going to bring up is that Termar is getting close enough that you need to have a plan, at least a concept of a plan, uh, for what you're going to do with Termar once he's ready. You know, Now you're more of the minor league guy at the deeper minor league levels. Has he played much shortstop? From everything I've heard, he isn't necessarily going to be an answer at shortstop. Do you plan on moving Nikki G over to short? So I'm just saying that I don't disagree with your plan of backfilling a little bit more, but I don't think they should be tied down too much. That's why I think Alika might not be the worst thing, because losing, DFAing him when the next guy comes up might not, it's not a big loss. He's been a serviceable backup. I think he could do better with the bat, but who in the organization really couldn't. But yeah, I don't want him to go spend a ton of money on a backup, especially when you seem to have a glut of middle infielders throughout the upper minor league system, but also in the major leagues and on your bench. But like we said before, when we were the wild card here is Key Brian Hayes and his back, because you have Triolo, as we've already mentioned during the show, but you have to keep in mind that at any moment Key's back could go out and you lose him for an extended period. If he can manage that back and have some more consistency and be a little more reliable that he's going to be in the lineup, I think that makes the decision a little bit easier. But they might have to go your route just for that purpose of having a guy based on where they are in their window and where they want to be competing wise. Yeah, you can't necessarily just roll the dice. I basically am going to go into the season assuming that Key Brian Hayes is going to lose a chunk of his season due to his back injury, and that you're going to have Triolo playing third. And yeah, so this has to be the right fit, and it can't be somebody that they commit too much time to or money to, because I think that the bullpen is something that they are going to have to address externally. But hey, at least we don't have to worry about the starting rotation as much.
And to answer your question, they did play Tamar a little bit more shortstop this season. In previous years, he was kind of being thrown in there just because, I mean, they had, and in the minor leagues, like guys will play quote unquote out of position at times just because you have so many prospects at that level that may specialize at those different positions. But this year, they did make a concerted effort to play him more at shortstop. I'm looking at it right now. He played 322 innings at shortstop this season across all levels. And last year he played 46. I mean, so obviously they may be looking more in that direction for him. And I think that the Pirates kind of like those guys that can kind of flip flop between short and second.
Mm-hmm.
Versatility has always been a kind of a big thing, for Ben Cherington. So, and I mean, here's the thing is, I mean, Nick Gonzalez, like I said, in a pinch, actually in the times I've seen him play shortstop, shows more range than I think he was maybe given credit for in the beginning. And these guys are professional athletes. So it's like, I mean, if you got to ask them to play it for a few games, they could probably do it. Ask them to play it for a season, some of those warts may show up. But the one thing you were talking about there, Scott, that kind of, what Pirates fans are looking for, and something we've talked about previously, even before this show, is, having those guys that are here for, more than 1 year. Not signing Carlos Santana for 1 year and then bringing in Ronnie Tellez for 1 year. Bringing in Gerard Dyson back in, and then, now we have Michael A. Taylor for that 1 year. So Yasmani Grandal, Roberto Perez, like whoever you would want to mention, it's all these 1 year deals. And I mean, I look at MLB trade rumors like I'm pretty sure that you do. I look like everybody else does, and kind of sees these contracts thrown out. And to me, like, thinking is that, are these really multi-year deals we're looking at anymore, or are they just, smoke and mirrors? Because when Rhys Hoskins, and I bring his name up a lot because I know a lot of Pirates fans wanted him, is that he was signed to a 2-year, $34 million contract. Is the way it was written when it came out. Pirates fans would have jumped up and been elated. Well, what they didn't know is that part of that was like a little bit of like a buyout in there. So basically, right now, he made $12 million the first year. He's making $18 million the next year. There is a mutual option for the following year, which would pay him that $4 million, which is what makes it $34 million. But he had a player option for this year. So for a player that had negative 0.2 B WAR, 0.1 F WAR, he is getting a raise from 12 to $16 million. He did have, 26 home runs, was pretty much a league average hitter, 98 OPS plus, 100 WRC plus. I don't think Pirates fans would be too happy if we had a player that performed and saw those numbers outside of the home runs. Because we had Andrew McCutchen, who had 20-some home runs and had better numbers than that for much less money, and said, okay, this guy didn't have a great year. He's going to opt into this because he didn't have a great year, and now we have to pay him more money.
Yeah, that's why I think that it's actually smart that the Pirates and small market teams in general don't engage in these opt out contracts. I remember when Brian Reynolds was negotiating his contract, there were rumors about opt outs, and it's completely disadvantageous to a small market team because we've talked about this before. When when a player underperforms, it gives the player all the leverage. When the player underperforms like that, with Hoskins, as you mentioned, they can stick it to the team and guarantee their money, and he can get his raise. Bellinger, he did the same thing. He had an opt out that he decided to exercise his option. And yeah, so these players that underperform get rewarded, but if they do overperform the contract, if the team actually saves some money in that situation where they overperform their contract, they're gonna because what Blake Snell's doing that, right? And
Yeah.
you opt out, and okay, we're gonna retry the free agent market. I'm gonna make more money, and then your team is looking for a replacement. So I don't see how it benefits a team at all. And I know that in today's environment on social media, we're supposed to be all pro player, but as a small market fan, the Pirates have to hit on some of these deals, and they have to kind of steal a player every once in a while and sign him to a contract that they vastly overperform. Instead of so we can shop in free agency. I think that that's another thing that it just kind of popped into my head that we're seeing with trends that because of opt outs in a lot of these deals for your normal free agent players, Hoskins. I'm sure that like your Pete Alonso's, guys like that will probably have some kind of opt out deals. You see it across the board. Um, Now, because the Pirates aren't going to engage in those team unfriendly kind of contracts, we're shopping more on the waiver wire, and you're doing more, prove it deals with your Rowdy Telez's, etc. And so it kind of takes a chunk of the store in free agency away from teams that are in a financial position like the Pirates.
Yeah, and that's what makes me put my tinfoil hat on, at least for a second, as a fan, is that, we talk about players when they have off years, kind of opting into contracts. And a big name that comes around, and I've heard a bunch, from, people around the Pirates podcasting, whoever it may be, media, and it's not anything that has any smoke or any fire, which is basically saying, I want Ha-Seong Kim. And I think it's because you've always wanted Ha-Seong Kim.
Yeah.
I don't think that you're really thinking with your, I don't know if it's, like, you're probably thinking with your fan brain at that point in time. I've been a fan of Ha-Seong Kim. And who wouldn't have been? Ha-Seong Kim, over the past few seasons, especially the seasons before, 2022, 4.9 war, 2023, 5.8 war. Who wouldn't want to have that on their team? Last year, 2.6 war, obviously injured at the end of the season. He opts out of his contract with the Padres. The only reason I would think that Ha-Seong Kim would opt out of his, contract with the Padres and not take that 1 year deal is because a lot of people said they're thinking, well, he's going to be healthy and he's going to be ready to go and he's going to be on a prove it year. I'm going to take the opposite thing. Tinfoil hat. You opt out of that contract because you want to sign one of these multi-year deals, knowing for a fact that you are not going to be the same player for this season. I told you before this episode, I looked into it and saw what the average recovery time was for a labrum surgery. The average recovery time to get back on the field, and this is playing, is 6 months. So for him, you're looking at October, November, December, January, February, March. So he could possibly be back on the field in April, obviously having rehab starts and stuff. He said in an article that came out from MLB Trade Rumors that it's like mid-April to beginning of May. To me, that's looking at major league time. If you could do a quick rehab, you're not at full strength from those injuries on average 11 months. So you're looking towards the end of the season. If he, somehow has like a great year in spite of this, I mean, I still wouldn't eat my words on this. I still wouldn't eat crow. It's just that I believe that he wants a maybe little bit here, see what he proves himself, gets like one of those opt-outs for a player and has a larger contract for at least the next year to be able to prove himself. And then hopefully, the team would pick up a mutual option. He'd be looking for like a 2 to 3 year deal, or that he could hit the free agent market still at a fairly young age at that point in time and perform well, because any other way, it doesn't make sense to me for him to opt out of a guaranteed contract when everybody and their brother knows he's not going to be healthy for this entire season or for this season at all.
Yeah, I think he's trying to capitalize on being kind of sought after, and he has been on many lists for the last 2 seasons for Pirates fans. So once we latch on to a particular player, we don't let it go until he does sign a long-term contract somewhere else. And maybe he's looking at somebody like a Reese Hoskins that, okay, yeah, coming off an injury, get that contract, make the good money, have the opt-out that I can just automatically opt into to guarantee myself that second year. Yeah, I don't see him as being a fit for the Pirates.
Yeah. And so, like, we talked about guys that could be fits for the Pirates. And I feel like some of these guys also kind of fall into that potential 1 year opt out. Like, you may get the best version of them or you may get the worst version of them. And these are just some of the names that have been thrown out, a lot by fans, by podcasts, by media, just in articles and whoever it may be. Tyler O'Neill's at the top of that list. Max Kepler's right there.
Hmm.
Jock Peterson and Michael Conforto. With a lot of those, we're seeing very up and down years. Like Tyler O'Neill last year, yeah, would I take that 132 OPS plus, 31 home runs, 113 games? Yeah, that's not great, but for a guy that's injured, I mean, I'm pretty sure we can fill in, some of those other games. 2.6 B WAR. Yeah, I would be signing up for that with what the projections are. 3 years, I've seen 3 years, $42 million. 3 years as high as $48 million. What if you got 2023? 72 games played, 9 home runs, 0.3 B WAR. I almost guarantee you that guy on his contract has a player opt out after the first year. I almost guarantee it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that with some of those guys that are injured, that's where we're seeing the power. Maybe it's Boris's influence. We saw with Carlos Correa was really one of the first ones that did this kind of contract for various different reasons. But with these guys that are injured, they're the kind of guys that maybe in the past you would have had like a vesting option with games played or plate appearances, something that would prove that, okay, we'll commit to you for that second year if you can prove to us that you can stay healthy. And so the team can kind of protect itself. Those kind of contracts have gone out the window. And it is all the power on the end of the agents and the players. And so that the players that are injured quite often, like your Tyler O'Neill, but Conforto missed a season for an injury, those guys are protecting themselves. And hey, you know what? It takes two to tango. The team has to agree to it, and there's going to be out of the 30 teams, somebody's going to agree to do that kind of contract because they want that kind of player. Their fan bases are banging the desk hard enough that they're going to actually give in and do that. But yeah, a lot of those kind of power. So if it's what are the Pirates going to do? Are they going to give in to the trend and take a major risk, which we know that Nutting is risk averse, or or are they going to stay the course and they're going to do the get a Trey Cabbage, or they're going to sign another Rowdy Tellez contract? They need to make the decision, and I honestly think that Charrington and what we've seen from him is he's very, you can say disciplined or you can say stubborn. It would probably work either way. That he has his plan, he has a tunnel vision for his plan, and I don't see him straying too far from the way he does things or the way he plans on doing things.
No, and it's for me, it's I mean, I know Charrington has always been looked at as, within the fans' perspective, and my perspective to a degree is that, you're buying low on these guys that you're hoping that have, bounce backs, like with a Rowdy Tellez. Myself and other people, mentioned those 35 home runs. Can he get back to that? I feel like with some of these guys, even with a Tyler O'Neill, you're hoping, can he be that same player again? Because the two previous years he wasn't. Can Jock Peterson be that same player? A 2.9 WAR player? Because the 3 seasons before that, he was 0.6, did have a 1.4, and then 0.1. Michael Conforto was 1.3 last year, was 0.7 the year before. So you're like kind of hoping that you don't have like these bad seasons. Somebody that wants to sign Max Kepler, he had a down year last year, 1 WAR. The previous 3 years, he was up above 2 WAR. So you're still taking a risk. It may be a different risk. I just feel like that it's a risk with more money spent, and that if there's that higher number at the payroll, people will be happy.
And I guess I keep asking myself the question, when you do these Rowdy Tellez type contracts where you're hoping for them to get back to a certain level or outplay their previous couple of years, the frustration from a fan is okay, let's say they do. Let's say that Rowdy Tellez would have had a monstrous year and would have hit those 35 home runs and gone crazy. You have it for 1 year. What's your benefit beyond that? You have to make it happen that 1 year. Where if you really feel confident about some of these players and you take a leap and you sign them to a 3 year contract, and you know and these type of contracts are kind of gone because you do have to now do the opt outs. If you feel like you've identified a guy that can help you long term and you do take that risk for 3 years, that's way more risk. Now, you have to pay him even more to not have an opt out. If Rowdy would have had an incredible year, okay, we did it for 1 year and now he's gone and he's going to free agency anyway. You had to catch lightning in a bottle that one particular year. And when you fill your lineup with three or four of those guys, you lessen the opportunity to have them all hit at the same time. The likelihood that they're all going to hit at the same time, you're going to have some misses. I think as Pirates fans, we're just looking for commitment, and can we get something that shows we're looking beyond this year?
So either way, we're screwed.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Now, there was some actual news that came out uh, after you just heard Scott and I go on and on about possibilities, but I think it was a really good baseball discussion. Got some thoughts of each of ours out there and, kind of what could happen in free agency. The Pirates made two hirings that when, Scott and I were talking about this previously or, earlier today, was saying, I said, I can't complain about it. We have a new hitting coach, a familiar name, Mr. Matt Haig. Did not come directly from the Pirates, went from the Pirates, went to Toronto, and then became a hitting coach with the Blue Jays organization. He is the Pirates' new hitting coach. And then Brent Strom, the pitching guru from the Houston Astros, went to the Diamondbacks, is now the assistant pitching coach, not the bullpen. We thought we were going to hire a bullpen. We hired an assistant. Scott, what are your first few thoughts on this?
Well, I remember Matt Haig from the time he was a pirate, the hit collector, as he was deemed. And of course, I don't know, so many people are leaving Twitter/X that they may have not seen that when I went out there and I said that he was coming home, and that I bet that Clint Hurdle was proud. Clint did confirm to me that he was proud that a player of his was getting that kind of promotion. I do want to say that this, I believe, is a move in the right direction because with Andy Haynes, we were hiring a cast off from the Brewers. He had been fired from the Brewers. Now we are not only hiring a former Pirate, but we're hiring a rising star, somebody who was working their way up through an organization. Spent 2 years at Double A with Toronto, a year at Triple A year as the assistant hitting coach, uh, and Fangraphs did an article in like July where they called him one of the best young hitting coaches in the game. So we're going and we're upgrading. I feel like we're going for somebody that maybe doesn't have the experience as a hitting coach, but he does come with a bit of a pedigree as a rising star. I listened today to Robert Murray's podcast that they were doing a live podcast where he had nothing but good things to say about how the Pirates made this good move, and that he feels like one of the biggest beneficiaries of this could be Key Brian Hayes if he can unlock that potential. Because I know going into this past season with the defense that Key plays, and if he could unlock what he had at the end of the previous season, he could potentially be an MVP candidate. And hiring Matt Haig could be a step in that direction.
Yeah, and with Haig, like I talked to you about this, and everybody knows my stance on all of this is that a lot of people like focus on the Ben Charrington philosophy and that it's this patient approach at the plate. Um, yeah, it may be a Ben Charrington philosophy, but it's more of an analytics philosophy. It's stuff that has reached across Major League Baseball. If in one breath we're going to say it's become a three true outcome game, the strikeout, the home run, or the walk, and then crucify the Pirates for kind of doing that to a degree. They didn't have the home runs because they didn't have the power potential just yet. They definitely did have a decent amount of walks, but they struck out, a little bit too much. It's more of the execution of the plan and possibly with Andy Haynes, the message of the plan. I look at Matt Haig, I believe, under 40 years old. Uh, and, a young fan may say that's an old guy. To a guy who's 45 right now and to, a hitting coach who is older than me, like that's a young guy within this industry. He's a guy who, played his heart out in the minor leagues, a la Crash Davis style, also went across the pond and played and then came back and, like you said, made his way. I mean, I know he was hired in 2020. There wasn't a minor league season. So he was within that organization, but basically flew up through the organization. Nobody has a bad word to say about him. And the other part is that I look at this right now and think, okay, this guy is closer to the age of the players. This may be somebody who can relate to the players. This is somebody who can maybe, you know, sit down and explain stuff to them better because I know that Pirates players had voiced, I was in interviews and stuff towards the end of the season, or at least reports, that they were overwhelmed with, the information they were being presented with and may have not gone up to the plate. Went up with a lot of information, but, didn't know how to process it. So a guy who's not been away from the game for that long, I believe, played his last minor league game in 2018 or 2019. This may be, it definitely is a step in the right direction, I believe, in that getting somebody who can maybe relate to the players a little bit better, somebody you said that isn't a guy on the way out of an organization. We're not picking up off the scrap heap. And then also, it is kind of cool to see, some of the guys on Twitter like, Fort and Matt Capps and all those guys getting really excited for, one of their former teammates stepping back in and being the hitting coach. For me, I don't believe the philosophy is going to change. I believe it's a philosophy across Major League Baseball. I think that's going to be in the delivery of the message and working with those players to make those changes. I mean, I still call it a good hire, fresh eyes, fresh mind. And then the Strom hire, can't go wrong with that. A guy, I mean, we've already done this with Dewey Robinson from the Rays, bringing a guy who had been their pitching coach, bringing him in to be a special assistant. And you see what has happened to the pitching development within the Pirates. Can't go wrong with having more eyes on the major league team and more voices to a degree because not one voice is going to reach everybody. So if you have other guys working in without like throughout the system, like you can't disagree with that. And his track record speaks for himself.
Yeah.
From 2014 to 2021 with the Astros, he was probably one of the best pitching coaches in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to Haig real quick, I think that you're right. If you can change up the message and that paralysis by analysis, if he can quiet the minds. And it seems like he's a big believer in the machine that simulates the deliveries of the spin and rotation, all of that for the players. And that's, I know that the Pirates have one of those. I mean, the Fort did a whole story on that, having one of those machines, and so he's a big believer in that. As far as Strom goes, yeah, any guru that can maximize. And we talked about this before. If you can spend a little bit of money on a coach that can potentially unlock millions of dollars worth of production, and you might ask yourself, Strom's a guy who was with the Astros, who was the pitching coach for the Diamondbacks when they went to the World Series, right? I believe so. Um, then what's he doing taking an assistant pitching coach role with the Pirates? But really, if you're a guy in his position that truly loves teaching pitching to guys, who better to teach to than Paul Skeens? You have an opportunity to be, working with Paul Skeens on his second year in the majors. You have Jared Jones, and then the guys that are coming up. We're going to see Bubba soon. We're going to see, Harrington, Burrows. All those guys are going to be contributors. If he can get Mitch Keller to take that next step, because I've been saying for weeks and weeks that if the Pirates are going to truly be contenders, you have to get Mitch Keller to play over his head. And this could be a step towards that. And with a team in the position that the Pirates are in, you have to have all the little things go right to make a real splash in this league.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what it's going to be. Is you mentioned with like Keller is getting the best out of him to get him to be the flashes that we've seen for more consistent point in time during the season. Because I honestly believe that's what is going to get us over that quote unquote hump more than these free agent acquisitions, more than the trades that Ben has talked about. I mean, unless you're going to make some sort of ridiculous trade to bring in somebody who is a no doubt going to be in a position for a long period of time. Because I mean, even people have talked about Luis Robert, and he was injured for a lot of last season. He has a pretty extensive injury history. When he's on the field, he's one of the best center fielders in the game. But would that be an answer? I mean, whether you like the message or not, I mean, I think we already knew the answer to this. Is that Ben Sherrington has said the most chance that we have to get to a playoffs to be successful is going to come internally. I mean, if we can go out and get the Dewey Robinson and the Brent Strom of the hitting world, I wouldn't be opposed to that. And that's no disrespect to Matt Haig, because Oscar Marine, for the most part, I believe people would say has done a really good job. But it doesn't hurt. And like you said, that's something I'd mentioned previously. When John Nunnally was going to be fired, is like, why don't if he works well with Brian Hayes, just pay him $100,000 a year and have him be on the, the staff, whatever it may be. Because I know those guys aren't making much more than that anyway. Like, what would be the fault of having 4 hitting coaches and 3 pitching coaches, to be able to unlock a player that will provide you, like you said, with millions of dollars in production? It would be, I think, thinking outside the box for a small market team, which is kind of what worked for us before in the early 2010s, which was, leading the charge on sinkers and shifts. Like, it's a joke now to a degree with some of the pitchers, but man, people weren't complaining when it was working.
Right, right. And maybe by adding more coaches, you can take some of this pressure. Because part of my worry with Haig is that if it is true that the major league hitting coach is responsible for coordinating the hitting philosophy for the entire and overseeing the hitting philosophy for the entire system, that could be a lot for a guy who's going into his first job as the actual hitting coach and not just an assistant. And so by providing more coaches, because what Don Mattingly was the offensive coordinator for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think he's moving away from that position now, but having somebody else. We've talked about that a lot too. You need to have one person who can oversee that, and then just let Matt Haig work with the major league players day to day, and just have that be his focus to unlock all the potential that he possibly can for the guys that are on the field.
Yeah, and the weird thing is that they did hire somebody to be assistants to Marine and Haynes last year, but I didn't hear many people mention their names after their hiring, so I'm not really sure exactly what they did. So maybe some of those guys can get those scoops and go post them on Blue Sky or something.
Yeah, maybe those guys are just running and getting coffee. I don't know.